Should I confess one thing? I've been waiting for this moment to have a chat with Lalit in a public forum from last 17 years. I have a pleasure and privilege of knowing Lalit from last 15 years. And Lalit, I want to start with one question which you need to be open. I've seen you performing, working as diligently as you were 15 years back from the time I know you. What's that secret sauce?
I think I just love what I do, and it just keeps you going. There's always a new challenge, and you know, the business that I am in, you know, is presenting infinite opportunities from, you know, challenges. It's very exhilarating. It's very exciting. There's never a dull moment. There's always a problem to be solved, and there's always a new road to be made, and that sort of keeps me going.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, let me put this directly into a double down question, and we discussed in the morning. I think the narrative of the GCCs, what used to happen earlier, has changed. 17 years, you've got about 105 GCCs. And you must have talked to multiple CXOs, the folks in GCC as well. But I think one thing which is coming out very clearly, what's happened in the past will not happen in the future. What's the new paradigm, Lalit, what you're seeing in the GCCs who are today set up, wanting to move to the next stage? And second most important, which is intertwined, is what's the next level of narrative in the GCCs from here on?
Right. So, I mean, GCCs, as we know, have been in the making for almost 2 decades or more, and they continue to evolve, mature, and in some ways simplify, right? So I think this is, I guess, counter to many of, you know, the perceptions that people may have in this room. But there is this whole notion of diminishing distance between the GCC and the enterprise. I mean, the whole notion of GCC would go away. I think the time has already come. The GCC is the enterprise. The GCC, in some ways, has become very purposeful. Many of us in this room have the opportunity of being the front office of the organizations that are hosting these GCCs. You know, one of the notions we have been lobbying extensively with NASSCOM is to possibly find a better concept than a GCC, you know, given the enormous impact this business model can have on the future of businesses and industries and enterprises. So I guess the way forward, the future is possibly a much more simplified narrative in terms of GCC being the enterprise, right? The concept of GCC by itself in some ways is divisive. You know, it sort of silos a part of the organization that has the enormous potential of reimagining and transforming and disrupting the future of the organization. It has to be completely integrated with the mainstream enterprise. And from that perspective, you know, the GCC is the enterprise. And a lot of new GCCs that are on the anvil will have the mandate of, you know, defining the future of the companies. One of the key narratives that is bringing in the GCCs in the current times is based on the premise that most industries are being Amazonized, and as a result, this brings a profound change for the organization that can have a derailing impact. And therefore, GCCs can be change agents at scale. They can be transformation accelerators, and that's obviously creating a huge opportunity to this industry that has come of age, that is at a point of inflection. Much of what happens in the GCC space is going to be like what's happening in AI in many ways, right? There is, it's a very unique combination of certainty and obviously uncertainty because of the enormous potential that the business model holds for the organizations. We are bringing in a GCC every 3 weeks, and every new GCC is different, better, more agile, more nimble, more purposeful, more impactful than the previous one. And as we go along, I'll give you some anecdotal examples of the role GCCs are beginning to play in redefining or reimagining or disrupting the mainstream enterprise in ways that was not even conceivable earlier.
No, I think it will be exciting for the audience to also hear what the new age GCCs would be like. Intertwined with what you said, this whole aspect of GCCs becoming mainstream on the business strategy. Now, if we go back, that wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. Of course, an evolution has happened. But there is also a demand from the parent organization, look into innovative product and services, be more transformative in terms of capabilities. Now, over there, in your lens, Lalit, and your viewpoints, how this mainstream impact of strategies getting defined by GCCs and parent organization can coexist.
Yeah.
Our realization, and I'm just trying to build one more, there is a gap. There is a gap today because, of course, as you rightly said, it depends on the maturity of the GCCs. But are there some, I would say, accelerated learning they can take to kind of get to this stage?
Yeah, so let me begin by putting an important notion of the fact that the GCC industry is increasingly getting very fragmented in perspective. There's a very broad spectrum out there, and I think we've used the notion of GCC in a very simplistic way to talk about a business model where a company essentially establishes a global team and makes it obviously purposeful. It could be cost arbitrage, it could be capacity arbitrage, it could be competency arbitrage, it could be building skills or capabilities in new areas, right? There are different types of companies. There are traditional enterprises, banks, insurance companies, airlines, hotels, media companies, retailers, CPG companies that are setting up GCCs. And they are operating in a very different way, and increasingly the opportunities they would present to all of us would be very different from, let's say, multi-brand, multi-country, multi-businesses, enterprises that are setting up shared services centers or GBSs. There are tech and product companies that are obviously creating capacity augmentation centers. There are the whole SMB sort of market. I mean, what was a model largely used by Fortune 500 is now being used by Global 20,000. Anyone can set up a GCC, right? I mean, that's where we are. So therefore, it's important to understand that, there isn't this notion of one size fit all when it comes to GCCs. But to answer your question, let me take the example of traditional enterprises. When I say traditional enterprises, non-tech, low-tech, companies that are increasingly becoming huge consumers of technology, data, everything that we're going to talk about in the conference today about AI, they'll become massive consumers because they would be the businesses that will see, I guess, maximum amount of impact. For a lot of these companies, there are essentially two challenges that makes the whole GCC model a very strategic opportunity to reimagine and transform the business. The first has to do with just the DNA. So GCCs are now becoming enablers for DNA surgery for these enterprises. They don't have the DNA to be a tech company in disguise or whatever their core business is, right? So fundamentally, they are an insurance company or they run an airline, and they just don't have the DNA to make sense of AI and data and technology and digital and everything that GCCs are sort of excelling in. So for those kinds of companies, GCCs become an incredibly powerful sort of platform to accelerate, growth and transformation of these enterprises. The second, which is a related point, is their inability to attract and develop talent in a lot of areas that we are talking about. I mean, if you take a retailer, they're great in supply chain, they are incredible when it comes to merchandising or marketing or managing, store operations, whether it's offline or online. But when it comes to making sense of AI or transforming infrastructure to cloud, they just don't have the ability to manage the new job families, and therefore GCCs are helping them in terms of accelerating workforce transformation. So a very simple narrative for GCCs is the fact that they are work and workforce transformation enablers. The other aspect that is going to be at play is going to be the whole notion of power of ecosystem. So the GCC operating with service providers, with startups, and with tech product and platform companies are in the middle of, obviously, opportunities that have not existed or do not exist for traditional enterprises in terms of driving their growth and transformation agenda, right? So essentially, the way it is all changing from the perspective of greater adoption of GCCs and more impactful GCCs coming in is a combination of workforce transformation, the fact that business and technology is transforming, companies are morphing into technology, digital enterprises in disguise of whatever their core business is, the optics associated with hiring the right talent, just the DNA of the companies, and the ability to drive change, which is not possible in a conventional environment.
So essentially what you mentioned, one size doesn't fit all. Second, this whole piece around workforce transformation, because the pathways in terms of the job ladders, careers are different in the GCCs, depending on the whole spectrum of the workforce composition from a parent organization. Third, what you really said, look, at some level, it's also about the tech being the play. Are GCCs really geared up to do it in-house, or they can look at external partner ecosystem as well? Now, one thing which, and this is from the lens of GCCs, Lalit, I'm actually alluding and would love to hear your views, is stakeholder management, C-level advocacy. The fact over there is that there are folks sitting at the parent organizations miles away, and there is a work which is happening out here. Now, sometimes this whole aspect of how do you strengthen, how do you really count upon what you're doing out here becomes a rallying cry for the organizations in their parent, I would say, units and all. How does one go about doing that? Because somewhere there is no alternate then saying, okay, I'll set up calls, I do those reviews, I do kind of, let's say, some meetup sessions. But is there a way to kind of build that C-level advocacy, stakeholder management, back out here with the GCCs and with the parent companies?
Yeah, so, this is a very interesting question, because if you put it in the perspective of the very wide spectrum of GCCs that are out there, the GCCs that have been established, let's say in the last 5 years, where you are an integral part of the organization, you are equal partners in terms of driving the growth agenda of the enterprises. I mean, this problem obviously is not as profound as the GCCs that were established 10, 15 years back. I mean, if there was any notion of versioning of GCCs, I mean, we are possibly at version 7.0 if the GCCs in early 2000s were 1.0. And in a 7.0, GCC is just another office location. So therefore, you have global leaders, they have functional responsibilities, and the narrative is to drive business outcomes, in contrast to being an outpost or being a back office, or even the language around the parent-child or any form of hierarchical or a subservient relationship that has traditionally existed. So there are a whole lot of GCCs established in the recent times that really do not have this issue. And there are GCCs being set up as we speak that have the front seat in the cockpit and are essentially literally in the driver's seat in terms of driving the new narrative, the reimagination of the enterprises. And they are actually in the middle of a very interesting paradigm where it's the rest of the organization that is now trying to see how do they make inroads into the GCC organization. Let me take a few examples here to make this end of the spectrum real. So one of the GCCs that we are in the process of establishing is for a large supply chain logistics company. And this company is essentially using its GCC, as they call it, Company 2.0, right? They feel that the organization that exists today in the US is too band-aided, is too patchworked, cannot just go to the next level, can do nothing with data and AI. And this is, AI is, one of the big reasons why this GCC is being established in India. So you're talking of a GCC that essentially will literally replace the incumbent, the legacy organization. So this is being built at scale, maybe over 10,000 engineers that will rebuild the new enterprise, right? Which will be based, and which will be a very digitally determined organization. Another GCC of a car rental company, a stealth GCC, building a new business. In 5 years, the market cap of the new organization or the new capability that is being built is going to be twice that of the incumbent company, which has been around for 80 years. So the hope is that in the next 5 years, you'll create twice the market cap by leveraging exceptional talent and building a product and capability that will create a new category in mobility, right? Something that doesn't exist.
You mentioned stealth GCC. So that's
Yes.
a new term. I think the one we are all used to is stealth startups.
Right.
So I think it's good to hear that's a new template which is evolving in the GCCs. I just want to chime in, Lalit, and make you pause and reflect on one particular thing which is very topical, business outcomes, getting a bang for the buck, this whole aspect of ROI. Now, on one side, there is always a reflection that, look, we are integrated, we are well, I would say, embedded, so we are mainstream. But on the other side, there are sometimes some rhetorics that look, prove your value. What's your viewpoint on this?
So let me start with a story. I did my first GCC with Target way back in 2005. And, we had an interesting...
Do we have the Target folks out here? Anyone from Target? Okay, there's one over there.
Yeah, so this was way back in 2005. And I also ended up, working for Target for the first 9 years. And I should report to Bob Ulrich, who was the legendary chairman and CEO of Target. And my first meeting with Bob, I guess 3 months after we started the GCC, Bob, by the way, hated the term GCC. And he warned me never use this concept or the term GCC, call it, Target India. And of course, Target, the notion has evolved over a period of time. And I went to Bob, my first meeting, and I had a bond paper, a nice color printout of a dashboard, and everything that you spoke about, Sameer, in terms of, the value that, we had started delivering to Target in terms of cost, in terms of productivity. And I passed on the printout to Bob, and he just tore it into pieces. And I just did not know how to react to that situation. You're sitting before the chairman and CEO of a then Fortune 21 company, and this is the reaction that you have to a dashboard. I guess I took 15 days to, bring out the value proposition of what we were doing in India.
And that was 2005.
This was 2005. Okay. So I'll make 2 points over here, or 3 points. The first, when we talk to our customers, we've never used the term GCC. We use it in opportunities in audiences like these because there's no other way of representing what we all stand for. The second, since 2005, it's now 18 years, we have never measured the traditional value, $23 an hour, 20% more productive, what is the attrition level, business impact. It has not been done across now 105 GCCs. We'll never do it, and I'll rationalize it with what I heard from Bob, in the first, meeting I had with him. And his point was, why are you doing something that we don't do in the company? Nobody measures what is the cost of delivery of services or what is the productivity. It's always about how are you impacting the business of the company in whatever form you are sort of expected to solve, right? If you're part of technology team, if you're part of analytics team, you may have a direct or an indirect role when it comes to the whole notion of business outcomes, right? So I guess this notion of value obviously depends upon the form, structure, the sponsorship, the mission, the purpose of a GCC, but increasingly, I spoke about GCCs becoming purposeful. You're creating a new business for a car rental company. You are reimagining a supply chain company. You are enabling the digital transformation of a retailer, or you're helping a consumer company establish a world-class, shared services or a business service kind of a capability. End of the day, we all enterprise talent, and we are expected to drive business outcomes that are part of our role, that are part of our mandate. There's a lot of talk, and I'm going to be a little provocative over here, around GCCs trying to become from cost centers to profit centers. Now, that can never happen, right? It's a myth. If you're part of a technology team, how do you become a profit center? If you are the AI part of the organization, you will have an indirect impact. You cannot separate out and become the Republic of GCC and be your own word and try and be what the organization is not. So essentially, the point I'm trying to make is GCC is the enterprise. We all enterprise talent. Be the company. No different from if you were hired in other part of the organization elsewhere, we would not be speaking this language. The time has come. The maturity has come. We are at that inflection point. And last week we announced 2 of our GCCs hiring their chief technology officers in India. One of them, I guess 1 year back, had their group CIO being hired in India. And actually, we are working on one GCC where the chief operating officer of the whole enterprise is going to be the GCC leader. So,
Lalit, you will have a tough time going outside of this room. Because there are folks who are waiting for you to meet the moment you announce this.
Yeah, so, absolutely. I mean, that's the opportunity.
Just to chime in, since we have a time, I want to actually pick up some questions from the audience, if that's fine with you.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Questions for Lalit, please raise your hand, mention your name. Spellbound or too much provocation? I have one question meanwhile, Lalit. And this is more on the side. In your own words, you started late, a decade in Navy, couple of years in Air Force, and I'm sure by that point of time, your, I would say, friends and all in the ecosystem would have gone to a next level. What triggered you to make a shift? You had a successful stint in the corporate as well, but what triggered at that point of time? Because that whole mindset, I'm into a certain area and I need to move out something, doing something else, to a stage you've set up 100 plus GCC. But what was that trigger moment for you at that point of time?
To do GCCs and
Absolutely.
ANSR? Before I started ANSR, I had seen both sides of the fence. So I used to be CEO of Datamatics early days of outsourcing industry, early 90s. And then I joined LG, and one of my mandates was also to set up LG's R&D center, which we established right here in Bangalore, super successful. And I guess, one of the most impactful GCCs ever done in 95, because we transformed LG, or we catapulted LG into the convergence era. So much of what LG is all about in terms of software and consumer devices, again, DNA issue is the work that the team in Bangalore does. And then I joined Rupert Murdoch, and there was an interesting time when AOL bought Time Warner, and that was the writing on the wall in terms of a technology company buying a media giant, and Jerry Yang and Yahoo were chasing Rupert and News Corp to buy News Corp. And the response was to set up a slew of GCCs for News Corporation that saved a day for News Corporation. So when I came out of news, that was the time the outsourcing industry was at its peak. Post Y2K, there was no stopping when it came to outsourcing industry. And I'd seen the other side of the wall, and I was had very strong conviction about the power of passion, the power of contextually empowered employees, who could make a big difference to enterprises. All that was needed was purpose, mission, a problem or a challenge, and Target came along when Target was competing with Amazon. And, we had to stand up a capability that would create a modern omni-channel, digitally determined retailer, right? So I think what really got me here were two things. One, in 2005, no one was betting that you could make a business out of GCC. So I took that as a challenge.
What was the term you were using at that point of time? Because GCC as a term wasn't there.
We use then and we use today, just a global team.
Global team.
Right? So today when we go and explain the concept of a GCC to our customers. We use the term global team versus a global capability center. There's also a sensitivity. Imagine going to a CEO, for him all or her, all parts of the organization are the same, and you say, I'm going to create or establish a global capability center in Bengaluru. I mean, it basically shows the rest of the organization at a different level altogether. You've got to be very sensitive to organizations. I mean, GCCs or this model is a show and tell model. Earn your stripes, do good work, communicate. I mean, nothing but success, nothing but good work, nothing but actually driving business outcomes will possibly get you there.
Awesome, Lalit. And,
Sameer, one question here.
Sorry, I can't see you.
Hi. Yeah, this side.
Yeah, there's somebody there.
Okay.
Hi, Lalit sir. Good morning. Gokul here.
Hey, hi, Gokul.
So, my question was, a couple of years back when the GCCs were getting established, they used to do everything. Process, technology, IT, infrastructure, especially the ones in the BFS. Do you see the current GCCs which are setting shop being very focused, that they will be only focusing on areas like advanced analytics or only on cloud and will not do the entire gamut across the horizontal? How do you see that shaping up in the next few years?
So is it one sliver approach, what Gokul was mentioning, or you see the full spectrum? What's the next level?
Yeah, there is no one-size-fit-all kind of an approach, right? You're solving an enterprise problem. We are, as we speak, setting up GCC for building pricing and promotion, okay, as a capability or as a team. And with an objective of driving certain business outcomes. You'll own pricing, which is going to be a combination of finance, technology, merchandising, and analytics. So it's a cross-functional team. How do you think about this team that comes together from 4 different set of capabilities that drives certain business outcomes, for the organization? There are lots of GCCs, owning shopping cart or e-store, right? So I think they're becoming a lot more cross-functional. They're becoming sort of oriented to a certain business problem that you're trying to solve. The horizontals of technology and business and data and AI will come with it. But GCCs will become another office, another location, another team, and they will get constituted depending upon what the needs of an organization is. You cannot force fit a model just because we can do a few things better or well to what an organization needs, right? There is, one of the things I'm a big proponent of is the fact that there is no business case for internal selling in a GCC. Any GCC that has a BD team, you guys are doing something really wrong. You are a part of the organization, so therefore, I think it will really depend upon what an organization needs. I gave you the example of a logistic company, one of the biggest companies in the world, recreating the organization here. Now, that's how far you can go with this, word of GCCs.
Well, Master Lalit, you have demystified some myths, unraveled the facts, but I think one thing which is absolutely very, very clear, the model of today will not be the model of tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think what's important is to up the ante, not only in terms of the stakeholder management, C-level advocacy, as you rightly mentioned, but create that leadership quotient, what is parent company asking today from a kind of a, let's say, outcome perspective. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate. Can we have a round of applause for Lalit, please?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Awesome.